There are some wars that are not just conflicts, but turning points that change the course of history. The First World War was such a war. It shaped the destiny of nations, redrew maps, destroyed empires, and made the world what it is today. But what if these outcomes had been different? What if the victors had chosen a different path that would have changed the course of history as we know it? Today we take you to a story where history is being rewritten. In this alternate world, imagine Germany triumphantly entering Paris, and the Ottoman Empire controlling the Suez Canal and paralyzing the heart of England. France and Britain have been erased from the shining pages of history, replaced by Germany and the Ottomans as the two rising superpowers. Because history is not the work of the victors. History is shaped by the shadow of those small but fate-changing decisions. Now we go to the first critical moment that changed this course of history, the Battle of the Marne. In real history, this battle halted Germany's advance and turned the war into a long, attritional struggle. But this time, in the smoky fields of the Marne, Germany will win and the world will take a completely different turn. September 1914. Europe is in flames. Just off the coast of Paris, the cool waters of the Marne bear witness to one of the most critical moments in history. The German armies are on their way to implement the Schlieffen Plan. In real history, they were stopped at this point, leaving Paris, the heart of France, in Allied hands. But this time, history takes a different path. In the smoky fields of the Marne, Germany triumphs, and the world drifts towards a different future. At the Battle of the Marne, the German armies advanced with unstoppable force. One by one, they broke through the Allied defenses and advanced rapidly into the interior of France. This time, the Schlieffen Plan was realized in all its glory. The gates of Paris were opened to German troops, and within days, the city streets echoed with German victory marches. The war on the Western Front was over within a few weeks. This was a great strategic advantage for Germany. There was no longer a threat in the West, and Germany could focus all its forces on the Eastern Front. Britain had lost its influence in Europe. This victory changed the course not only of the First World War, but of European history. By closing the Western Front, Germany took a major step towards gaining control of Central Europe and Eastern Europe. This would lead to the early collapse of Russia and Britain's complete withdrawal from Europe. The victory in the Battle of the Marne brought Germany absolute supremacy on the Western Front. Further, after this victory, all the attention was turned to the Eastern Front. Germany was about to defeat Russia and become the undisputed leader of Europe. But this was only the beginning of history.
Eastern Front, the fall of Tsarist Russia. In the year 1914, amidst the vast expanses of Eastern Europe, one of the bloodiest fronts ever opened. Tsarist Russia was a colossus that threatened Germany and Austria-Hungary with its heavy army. But victorious in the West, Germany set its full force against the East by a series of brilliant steps which would alter the course of the war. This time, the heart of Russia started to beat early. The Tsarist regime began to deteriorate fast before the heavy force of the German war machine. The year 1914 was characterized by the victory of the German armies at the Battle of Tannenberg. In actual history, this victory gave Germany a short-term success, but the fighting on the Western Front diverted resources away from the East. In this alternative scenario, Germany, buoyed by the confidence of an early victory on the Western Front, charged east in full offensive force. At Tannenberg, the Russian lines were shattered, and thousands of soldiers were killed or captured. The Russian army never recovered from this blow. The German victory was not just a battle, but the beginning of the collapse of a nation. The Tsarist army was demoralized, and the Russian people were crushed by the burden of war. By 1915, German armies had advanced deep into Eastern Europe. One by one, strategic areas such as the Baltic states, Poland, and Ukraine fell under German control. As the Russian armies retreated, the Tsarist regime's internal unrest began to grow. Economic collapse and popular revolts plunged the government into uncontrollable chaos. The streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg were filled with protests and strikes. This advance by the German armies marked, as it were, the beginning of the end to the Tsarist regime. In 1916, news from Moscow sent shockwaves around the world. Russia's heart had stopped beating. The rebellions had gotten out of hand, and divisions began even within the army itself. Tsar Nicholas II lost his throne, and pro-German government was installed with German support in Russia. German intervention condemned the Bolshevik seizure of power to the dustbin of history. The early collapse of Russia marked the beginning of a new order in Europe. The Baltic states, Poland, and Ukraine became Germany's industrial and agricultural depots. They not only fueled Germany's war economy, but also consolidated its dominance in the East. These German-controlled territories became a gold mine of natural resources and logistics. Russia's oil and mineral resources were used to supply the German war machine. This expansion made Germany the undisputed economic and military leader of Europe. These victories on the Eastern Front destroyed not only Russia, but also the hopes of the West. Britain and France were powerless in the face of Germany's victories on two fronts. This process, which began with the collapse of France on the Western Front, made Britain an isolated power. Germany was now the power deciding the fate of the whole of Europe. In the face of this new balance of power, Britain and France could only develop defensive strategies. But this did not change the fact that Germany could not be stopped. It is important to note that every victory taken by Germany in the Eastern Front was felt not only in Europe but also within the Middle East. Given the defeat of Russia, the Ottoman Empire turned her attention from east to south in the direction of the Suez Canal. With full technological and logistic support from Germany, Ottomans were ready to challenge Britain in the Middle East. Now we travel to the Suez Canal to explore this new balance of power from Europe to the Middle East. We will witness how Ottoman armies changed the course of history. The First World War was a conflict that would redraw the map not only of Europe, but also of the Middle East. The Suez Canal was the strategic cornerstone of this great war. This vital passage connecting the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean was the main artery between Britain and India and its other colonies. In real history, the Ottoman Empire's attempt to seize this critical point had failed. This time, however, history is being rewritten. In an alternative scenario, the Ottomans triumph at the Suez Canal and the balance of world power changes forever. By 1915, the Ottoman Empire launched a major offensive to capture the Suez Canal. Using modern equipment and logistical support provided by Germany, Ottoman troops led by Jamal Pasha were able to break through the British defenses around the canal. Ottoman artillery destroyed strategic British positions along the canal. Within weeks, the Ottomans were in control of the Suez Canal. This victory was not just a military success, but a devastating blow for Britain. The link between the Mediterranean and India was severed, paralyzing British trade routes. The Ottoman-controlled Suez Canal no longer served the interests of Britain, but those of Germany and the Ottoman Empire. The capture of the Suez Canal gave the Ottoman Empire not only military but also economic and strategic superiority. Merchant ships passing through the canal now paid taxes to the Ottomans. In addition, access to oil resources in the Middle East was completely under Ottoman control. This allowed the Ottomans to fund modernization projects. Thanks to cooperation with Germany, modern railroads, ports, and energy infrastructures were built on Ottoman territory. Istanbul became one of the most important commercial and cultural centers, not only in the Ottoman Empire, but also in the world. The loss of the Suez Canal was a disaster for Britain. Britain's ties with India and its other colonies were severed, and British influence in these regions was weakened. The British Army had to retreat to a defensive position in the Middle East. Rebellions in India and Africa began to threaten Britain's colonial system. The Suez Canal boosted the power of the Ottoman Empire and weakened Britain as a global power. This victory also reduced the influence of Britain and France in Europe. This success, combined with Germany's European victories, isolated Britain from the European stage and radically changed the world order. The rise of the Ottoman Empire, modernization, and power. With the Suez Canal victory, the Ottoman Empire became a reborn power on the geopolitical stage. Having increased its influence in the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire accelerated its modernization projects with the support of Germany. New railroads, industrial plants, and ports were built. Ottoman soldiers improved themselves not only on the battlefield, but also in the training that would form the basis of modern armies. The Suez Canal victory was not only a military victory for the Ottoman Empire, but also a cultural and economic rebirth. This success consolidated Ottoman dominance in the Middle East and beyond. The Ottoman control of the Suez Canal changed the balance not only in the Middle East but also in the world. Germany and the Ottomans took control of strategic areas in Europe and the Middle East, greatly reducing Britain's global influence. Britain became known only as an island state. This victory made Germany and the Ottomans not only military superpowers, but also economic and political superpowers. The future of the world was now shaped by these two great powers. The Suez Canal victory made the Ottoman Empire one of the most powerful actors in history once again. But this was only the beginning. Britain and France were preparing to muster all their forces to make a last stand against this new world order. Now we return to the dark days of Europe and witness Britain's last hope in the Atlantic. Sometimes the fall of an empire does not begin in silence, but with loud struggles on the seas. To Britain, the loss of Suez Canal to the hands of Ottoman and the victory of Germany in Europe was not defeat, but the beginning of a struggle for existence. Britain clung to one last hope: to survive as a global power, to protect its sea lanes across the Atlantic and bring the United States into the war. This set the stage for one of the fiercest naval battles in history, the Battle of the Atlantic. To bring Britain to its knees, Germany turned the seabed into its own battlefield. Submarines called U-boats targeted British trade routes across the Atlantic. These submarines were the deadliest weapons of their time, both technologically and tactically. British merchant ships were sunk one by one on the high seas, cutting off vital supplies. Torpedoes exploding in the depths of the Atlantic dealt a heavy blow to Britain's weakening economy and diminishing fighting power. Britain tried to overcome this threat with convoy systems and new defense strategies, but German submarines were always one step ahead. This war in the Atlantic was not only a chess game between ships and torpedoes, but also a chess game over the fate of nations. Great Britain had to turn its back upon the United States in order to counter Germany's superiority at sea. One diplomat after another was sent from London to Washington, arguing that the Atlantic conflict was a threat to America. In this alternative scenario, however, Germany's rapid victories and superiority over the Atlantic slowed down U.S. plans for intervention. More than anything else, America hesitated to intervene on the west coast of Europe, and Britain paid dearly for this delay. The late U.S. entry into the war weakened Britain not only economically, but also militarily. In London, the pressure of hunger and poverty on the population led to civil unrest. The Atlantic conflict marked the consolidation of Germany and the Ottoman Empire as the leading actors in the world. Germany, with its economic and military power, became a superpower on the European continent, while the Ottoman Empire, with its strategic superiority in the Middle East, became one of the most influential actors in the world. The decline of Britain and the belated intervention of the United States had given way to a world being reshaped by Germany and the Ottomans. The Battle of the Atlantic was not a war, but a stage upon which world history was rewritten. With the defeat of Britain, Germany and the Ottomans would emerge from being regional powers into global leadership. But that was just the beginning. Now we journey from 1924 to the present day to discover how this alternate history shaped the modern world. History is not only the story of the victors, but also of the new order established by the victors. In the alternate outcome of the First World War, Germany and the Ottoman Empire became the two most powerful states in the world. While the collapse of Britain and France ensured Germany's absolute dominance in Europe, the Ottoman Empire rose as a reborn empire in the Middle East and North Africa. This was not just a victory, but but the beginning of an era that radically changed the world politically, economically, and culturally. Germany consolidated control over both Western and Eastern Europe. France lost Alsace-Lorraine and the northern industrial regions, turning into an economically dependent state for Germany. The Baltic states, Poland and Ukraine, came under German influence and turned into the drive of the German economy. Berlin was no more just the economic and political center of Europe, but the world. The leadership that Germany provided was not only political, but it was also an economic revolution that drove the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. Modern industrial centers rose in Berlin to become Europe's manufacturing and technological hub. Under Germany's iron fist, the new order was reshaped for Europe. The Ottoman Empire enjoyed a period of economic and military florescence due to its hands over the Suez Canal and oil wealth of the Middle East. With the help of the German engineers, new railroads, ports, and a modern industrial center were laid down. Istanbul became once again a cultural and political rebirth, not only of the Ottoman Empire, but of the whole Islamic world. The oil resources of the Middle East boosted the Ottoman power in international trade. Ships passing through the Suez Canal generated huge revenues for the Ottoman treasury. This economic power made the Ottoman Empire not only a regional, but also a global player. Germany and the Ottomans became the center of the global economy, controlling trade routes and industrial resources. The end of British supremacy over the Atlantic strengthened trade ties between Europe and the Middle East. Germany established an economic union in Europe, while the Ottomans became the leader of the Middle Eastern Trade Union. Berlin emerged as the industrial capital of Europe, while Istanbul served as a bridge between East and West. These two cities became symbols of the New World Order. In this world order, for example, Germany and the Ottoman Empire did not lose their superpower status throughout the 20th century. Until 2024, the world order was formed by these two great powers. The US was never very influential, while Britain and France were secondary powers on the stage of history. It was Germany and the Ottomans who remained on the stage and became the world's economic, political, and cultural leaders. History is written by the winners. But if these winners had changed, the world would have been quite different. The victory of Germany and the Ottomans shows how history can be completely different with a small change. Would you like to live in such a world?